The next point is that it's going to take time for your brain to learn to filter out unimportant sounds and help you focus on what is important. Much of, and some would say most of what our brains do from a sensory perspective, so with hearing, for instance, is actually inhibitory. So it's switching off or tuning out unnecessary things. Around the home, you'd have fridge running, air conditioning, maybe fans, depending where you are, traffic noise. You're hearing your breathing, your footsteps, birds outside, and so on. There's always ambient sounds that are all around. It could be a clock ticking. You tend not to notice those sounds because they're not important for you to focus on and listen to all the time. And your brain works that out and subconsciously filters those sounds out so they're not bothering you and distracting you all the time. So when we get fitted with hearing devices for the first time, those filters need to be reset. Your brain doesn't know what's important to focus on at all, really. So we're starting from scratch in many respects. And it just takes time for your brain to work out what's useful, what's not useful, and to help you focus on the things that are useful. So probably a common objection or pushback that I get about keeping hearing devices in at least 12 hours a day comes from people who say, well, if I'm at home not having conversations with anyone, what's the point of having my hearing devices in? And that mindset I can understand because many of us can relate to needing to put on reading glasses to, say, read the paper or read the menu. You just pop the reading glasses on and so on. The thing is, the hearing system is totally different to our visual system. In fact, our eyes are the only two parts of our skull that the brain protrudes out of. So our eyes are actually part brain. So in effect, our eyes are a direct interface from the outside world to our brain. And we can close our eyes, we do it at night all the time, we could do it right now. We can focus in and out. We treat vision loss completely different to the way that we treat hearing loss. Whereas our hearing, essentially, for us to hear sounds, there's a number of processes that need to occur. And at the most important point, where in our inner ear, we're going to give you a quick tutorial about that a little bit later, but in our inner ear, in the cochlea, which is where all of you, that's where most of your hearing loss is. When we have damage to those structures, it's creating a barrier or a hurdle for appropriate sound stimulation to get through to the hearing centers in the brain. So if we've got sufficient damage done to the cochlea, that stimulation doesn't really get through at all, okay? So when we're helping to overcome that barrier or a hurdle, things are sounding of a different tone. We're picking up sounds often that we haven't heard for around 10 years or so. It just takes time for your brain to work out, well, what's useful, what's not useful. And all those times where you are at home alone, not having conversations and things like that with people, you are still hearing things, your footsteps, your breathing, air conditioning, traffic, clocks, things like that. And your brain in the process is becoming more skilled at filtering those sounds out. So when you do go out to that cocktail party or family function or something like that, all that time that you've spent in, I guess, less demanding environments, your brain in the process is becoming more skilled at being able to filter out what you don't want to hear and to focus on what you do want to hear. It's really clear in the clinic when we have patients come in that are underwhelmed with how their hearing devices are performing in background noise, and they might even say, oh, I'm not even really used to my own voice. You should know that all hearing devices now have little databases on them, so we can actually check for how often they're being worn. And more often than not, we get a pattern of complaint, usually relating to noise being overwhelming. And most of the time, the root issue is that those devices aren't being worn enough. So am I sounding like a broken record on that point? because that's actually my intention, right? I find that if a patient of mine hasn't heard or come across that particular point at least 20 times, it just doesn't happen. Right?